Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Zara Pedersen, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about visualization, specifically how to visualize as a Muslim. What does it look like to visualize from an Islamic perspective? Because let me tell you, it is different than what you might think visualization to be from the mainstream perspective. I know, shocker. But here, there is a couple of main differences that we need to be very aware of in order to use the law of attraction from an Islamic perspective. Because one thing that we know for a fact is, of course, that mainstream law of attraction is not the good way of practicing law of attraction. I didn't know what the word to use. It's the way to commit shirk. If we're using mainstream law of attraction, chances are we're committing shirk. But if we're using law of attraction from an Islamic perspective, we can use the theories that can be found in the hadiths, in the Quran, in Islam in general, and use it in a way that is conducive with the way that non-believers use law of attraction. And one of the tools that we hear about a lot in law of attraction is visualization. Now, I want to make it clear straight from the get-go that from my personal research and deep dives into law of attraction from an Islamic perspective, I have not seen anything specifically in the Quran or in the hadiths that it could align itself to the tool of visualization. Now, that is not to say, of course, that visualization is haram or that it doesn't work or anything like that. It just means that this is a theory that we as humans have found can be helpful to us, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, what we're doing in visualization is nothing other than imagination. Okay, so there is nothing, that either goes for or against religion. I mean, I suppose depending on what it is that you're imagining, if you're imagining yourself to be a creator and stuff like that, then I suppose we could be delving into a genre of visualization that maybe could be poo-pooed on. But honestly, other than that, it's just your imagination. That is what visualization is. If you don't know what visualization is, it literally is just the art or the skill of imagining something to be before it happens, okay? And creating a scenery of the thing before it, of the way that you want something to be. So obviously, and this is where we as Muslims have to be, make sure that we are aligning ourselves with the reality that is in line with our faith. And when we're using the law of attraction, and we want to use the tool that is visualization, we have to be very aware of a few things if we want to use visualization. So in the mainstream perspective or in like the mainstream visualization, this is what you do. You imagine something that you want, the thing that you're trying to manifest into your life. And then you take a few moments, once a day, twice a day, however many times you want to do it, and you imagine the thing to be, and you do that in great detail. You think about, what dress am I wearing? How's my hair that day? Who's around me? What's the smells I can smell? What time of the day did I wake up that day? What did I have to eat? How am I feeling around it? Like there's, as many details as you possibly can put into the experience of when the manifestation arrives to you. So just off the back of, that doesn't necessarily sound like anything that's wrong. And again, this is just you imagining things. It would be like saying that dreaming is haram. So visualization is not haram, and there is nothing inherently in this that is haram. The point where there is a little bit of friction, if you will allow me to use this word, is when in mainstream law of attraction, we attach the idea of the imagination of the thing into it then becoming the reality, i.e. we are the creators of it, okay? This is where we in Muslim law of attraction or Islamic or law of attraction from an Islamic perspective, let me not mess up my words here, where it can become where we're like, no, because we know and understand that we are not creators and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only creator, and nothing will happen unless he allows it to be. And so if we think of ourselves as like, if I imagine it, then it'll happen, then we are maybe inadvertently committing shirk there, because we are then basically saying that our imagination is a tool for creation, which of course absolutely not true. So how do you use visualization from an Islamic perspective? Because obviously we don't want to delve into that kind of realm where we are potentially doing something that is not good for us. Because here's the thing, you can actually use visualization as a Muslim. Now, there are a couple of things that you can do. The first one, I'll speak to two specific methods of using visualization, because the thing about visualization is that it's a very powerful tool to use, actually. And a lot of people actually swear by it, including very big athletes, very successful business people. Lots of people actually swear by this tool of visualization. And that is because it actually works. And now I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know exactly how it works, because that's psychology and I'm not a psychologist and I haven't done enough studies into that realm. And even if I did, I doubt I'd understand all of it. But you can absolutely go down that route yourself if you are inclined to do so, and you feel inclined to do so, and you feel like that would be an interesting subject for you to delve into. I think it would be very interesting to figure out. I know sort of like the very surface level of it, which I'll share with you. But keep in mind again that I'm not a psychologist and I don't understand the nitty-gritty details of it. But visualization is such a tool because our imagination, or our brain can't tell the difference between what we imagine versus what is real. Our brain can't, which is also why something like affirmations sometimes can work very, very well for some people. Because our brains don't know the difference between imagination and reality. It doesn't know the difference between those things. Again, this is just surface level psychology stuff, okay? So don't ask me why. Don't ask me too many questions about it. Ask other people many more questions about it. Do your own deep dives into this. But I think it's fascinating to know, because our brain doesn't know the difference between the two. So if we're imagining something, our brain doesn't know that it's just an imagination. It just delves right into it. It's like, yeah, absolutely. And that kind of imagination, I'm really struggling with my words today, apparently. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Let me get my words out. But that kind of imagination can fuel things in our brain. It can create a sense of reality, even though it's not here yet. That'll drive motivation, inspiration, creativity, a sense of want, bigger drive, things like that. And that is so helpful for us when it comes to us actually taking action and performing in a specific way. Athletes have been known to do this quite a lot. I've seen a lot of athletes speak about this, that before they go into a match, before they, I don't know, throw a ball or whatever, I'm not really a sporty person in that way. Before they do the thing that they want to do, they imagine themselves doing it and they live fully into the imagination of it happening. And they visualize, the way of the ball when they pick it up, or the club, or whatever it is, and it's like, okay, this is how I'm going to grip it, this is how I'm going to stand, this is the weather around me. And they can do this, like, they don't have to do it necessarily literally the moment, months and months before. They can do it literally the moment before they step up and do the thing, and they imagine the speed and strength at which they hit the ball or the thing. And as a result, when they step up, it's as if like the brain says, oh, I've already done this once before and I know how to do it. And so it just mimics and replicates what it did in its imagination. So it brings the imagination into real life, so to speak. Okay, that is the sort of the power of the visualization, right? And that is the thing that can make the tool of visualization so powerful for a lot of people, and why you'll hear a lot of coaches talk about using visualization in order to manifest the things that you want. Now, as Muslims, as I said before, we have to take certain precautions here, because while we can imagine something, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to bring it, in one by one scale into this reality. And so because of this, there has to be an element of surrender. In fact, the surrendering has to be a huge part of it. So for the first type of visualization you can do is follow the mainstream type of visualization, but constantly keep in mind that you are surrendering it all back to Allah. Meaning, even though I'm imagining all of this to happen this way, I know and believe that I cannot create this on my own, and that I need an allowance and permission from Allah for this to be the way that I want it to be. And so even if it shows up, but it doesn't show up the way that I imagined it, Alhamdulillah. And I'm willing to let go of my idea of how it's going to happen for Allah's plan of how it's supposed to happen. Do you see the difference? Where in mainstream law of attraction, you almost have to get attached to the outcome of the visualization. You have to almost, be like, the visualization is the way it's going to be because I have imagined it, i.e., you're the creator. Astaghfirullah, right? And in the Islamic version, we're allowing ourselves to imagine. We can visualize things. Of course we can, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this ability to do so. But we have to do it from a level, from a perspective where we know and understand that just because we can imagine something doesn't necessarily mean that Allah is going to follow through on our imagination. Just because we imagine it doesn't mean that Allah has to then say, okay, yes, sir, I will give you the thing that you wanted. I mean, astaghfirullah, we are his servants, not the other way around. So you can use mainstream visualization methods, but keep in mind, again, I would almost say, at the beginning of your visualization and at the end of your visualization, not just saying it and acknowledging it, but fully understanding and releasing and surrendering it back to Allah, everything that you have put into that visualization. This is so important because, again, there has to be an acknowledgement of the fact that you are not the creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can choose to say, you know what, I like your version. That seems like a good version. Or you hit the nail on the head. I'm going to adjust little things here and there. But yeah, actually, that was how I imagined it. Or he can say, you've got the right idea, but your execution of it is so far off. So I'm going to give you the thing that you want, but it's going to look very different. But trust me, it's going to be so much better than you even could have visualized in the best days of your visualization methoding or methods or whatever you want to call it, right? And that's what we have to understand and fully allow ourselves to surrender into if we want to use that form of visualization. Personally, I'm going to advise that you do this other type of visualization that I personally prefer to do myself, and that feels less problematic because there's less chances of us getting attached to our idea of the outcome visually in our minds, okay? So I call this visualization, although maybe there would be a different name to it, okay? Because what we're actually doing is not so much focusing on the details of how it's going to look, how it's going to feel, the outcome in pictures, so to speak, in our mind. But what we're attaching ourselves to is the emotion. Right, we're getting more excited about the emotional outcome than the visual execution of it. Okay, so this is how I personally use visualization. I deem it to be a bit safer because I know my feelings, and I know sort of like the baseline of my feelings, if so to speak. So if I want to achieve something, I will imagine having achieved it already. But instead of visualizing to every little detail what I'll look like, the people around me, the smells around me, the weather that day and all that stuff, I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on imagine having it already. Just that. Just what does it feel like inside of me when I will achieve this? And it can take a little bit of time to get used to this, because sometimes for a lot of people, they'll need, like that visualization, like to imagine what it's going to look like and things in order to feel it. But training yourself to only be in the feeling realms of when Allah blesses me with this thing, however it may look, however I may look at the time, however the circumstances may be, what is it going to feel like inside of me? What is the excitement that I'm hoping to feel once I achieve this success, once I achieve this goal, once I get to that point? What kind of thoughts am I thinking I will be having about myself, about the world around me, about the people who are there around me? Do I expect there to be a sense of sometimes grief? So we're literally going into every emotion, like sometimes it can be that sense. I'm going to use an example from myself because I feel like the example will probably be able to explain it better than I can just speaking into sort of like the generalness of it all. When I was going through my divorce, well, actually, this was after the divorce and I was still in my healing phase. And I would imagine myself on the other side of what that would look like, right? And I wouldn't imagine where I was in the world, who I was with, what I was doing, all of that stuff. But what I was imagining was the feelings inside me. And there was a sense of accomplishment that I survived this, like I made it through on the other end of something that felt really, really difficult, something that was a big test and trial. I felt stronger. I felt blessed. I felt looked after and protected by Allah. There was also a sense of grief, that grief of having to let go of something, that still lingers sometimes to this day. There's a sense of grief of like, oh, I had to go through that. I had to let go of the person I thought I knew in myself and in my ex-husband, having to let go of a life that you imagined with that person and things like that. So there's also sometimes these feelings that we don't necessarily deem to be positive, right? But it was, all of the emotions on the other side of it. And the grief side was a small aspect, but it was a side that I also had to acknowledge because I also understood, like, realistically, what will it feel like? And yeah, there will still be a little bit of something there. But overall, the feeling is still the pride of being able to get over on the other side, the sense of accomplishment, the sense of feeling protected and looked after by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the sense of feeling blessed and grateful for the blessings in life, even though Allah has, how do I say this, taken things away that maybe I wasn't ready in that time to be taken away from me, right? And so my method of visualization was that in the emotional realm. So I'm not imagining the outside circumstances and what it's going to look like and how old I'll be and all of these things. I'm imagining simply the emotional state that I will be in, what I will feel in those moments, because that is something that I can, to some level of certainty, predict. And so can you, right? There will, of course, be parts of it that you cannot predict. There will be things, I predicted perhaps certain things in the healing from the divorce that didn't matter as much emotionally as I thought they would, having come out on the other side. And certain things that I imagined that were far greater than I imagined they would be. Certain things taking up more space than I thought they would. So again, a level of surrender, because while we can predict that certain things are going to be felt this way, other things just, they just kind of don't manifest themselves, right? But the thing about our emotions, while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, as powerful as He is and the most powerful, can go in and influence our emotions and how we feel, it is still up to our free will what we choose to focus on, what we choose to make the predominant emotions, the leading emotions. This is still something that is within our control. And our emotions are not creators. They are just a state of being. And a state of being can be a powerful motivation as well. And that is still without having to visualize the external world and times and date and places and colors and smells and whatever, can still work in our brain as bringing it closer, making it more real, because our brain says, oh, we felt this once, we can feel it again. So I can go back to that state of being far easier than if I didn't have that moment of visualization, because again, our brain doesn't know the difference between, reality and imagination, right? We know logically, don't get me wrong, otherwise we'd all be living in la la land. We know logically, but the emotional state of it, again, please do your own research in this, because clearly, like, as I said, I'm not a psychologist. This is just surface level understanding of something that I am certain of is far greater and deeper than how I'd ever be able to explain it to you today. But our brains just, it's just like, oh, we've felt this before, so I know I'm capable of doing this. Well, I've seen this happen before, so I know I can do this. And it just mimics. It just goes in and it's like, oh, but we've done it before, I can do it again. That is what it does. And that can work as a huge drive and motivation and inspiration for us in these moments to get to that point. The difference, as I said, is that in this case, we're drawing on our emotions, what we're feeling in those moments, rather than what it looks like. So while there's still a level of surrendering, knowing and understanding fully that we are not capable of predicting the future, even down to the point, like how we're going to feel, we can estimate with much greater certainty how we would feel about something than how it will look to us when it comes, right? Because we can't predict the future, but we kind of know ourselves, right? So there's while there's still that level of surrendering, it is not at as a great of a scale as if you're literally visualizing the externals of the manifestation having arrived. Does that make sense? I know it can sound a little bit sort of all over the place, and I do apologize if I'm not very good at explaining it, but I wanted to try, because I do see people wanting to use visualization, and I think it's important to understand how to use this tool in a way that is conducive with our religion and doesn't go against it or make us go into a realm where we could be dabbling with stuff that could be perhaps sort of fall in under the sort of minor shirk or even big shirk category. Okay, so that's why it's important for me to say, while, we're using the theories and tools and everything from law of attraction, we have to always keep in mind that we're using it from a place of Islam. We're using it from a place where we are servants of a greater being, and a more powerful and knowledgeable being, and a being that we are servants to, and not the other way around. And so, especially with a tool like visualization, it is so important for us to know and understand that just because we imagine the externals of it and even the emotional aspects of it, there has to be a level of surrendering. But Allah, you know better. So however you choose to send it my way, I trust and believe that yours is the right way, because you are, after all, the greatest of planners. And so I will allow for you to plan, and I will simply take action towards that plan, right? So there has to be an element of that surrendering and being okay with that level of surrendering. Again, there is nothing inherently haram about visualization. It is simply a question of approach. It is simply a question of understanding. And that is generally with every tool and method and everything that we do in when we use law of attraction from an Islamic perspective. There has to be an element of understanding on a far deeper level than what mainstream law of attraction will allow us to do, because it is limited. Because you know why? It is man-made. Law of attraction from a mainstream perspective, although they have, they kind of got in the right direction in some places, they also are very limited by what man wants it to be, what man has created for it to be. And of course, man is limited. Allah is not. So when we're doing it from an Islamic perspective, it actually opens up the realm of possibilities for us. And that is what makes it so wonderful to use law of attraction from an Islamic perspective, because we no longer operate from a place of we are creators, because our knowledge and understanding is so very limited. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge and understanding is not. So when we lean on the ultimate creator and we say, I don't know, but you do, and I'm going to lean into what you know, our manifestations and law of attraction from this perspective becomes that much more powerful, because it's not up to us. It is up to the ultimate creator. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you tried visualizing before? Have you had success with visualization? How do you feel about visualization? How do you feel about, just sitting in your thoughts and having to imagine what it feels like? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm very curious. Feel free to reach out to me over on my Instagram at Manifesting Muslima. I will see you, inshallah, in next week's episode. But until then, my darling friend, please don't forget to live in love.